Welcome. You're listening to Celebrate Recovery at Peters Creek Baptist Church. This episode is part of our weekly companion conversations, created to help prepare our hearts during the week as we journey together toward our Friday night Celebrate Recovery gathering. Today's conversation continues our focus on mental health recovery and Principle 1, realizing that we are not God, that we are powerless to control our tendency to do the wrong thing, and that our lives have become unmanageable. This is week 4 of the journey. The early momentum has faded, the work feels heavier, and the process is starting to feel real. If you're feeling tired, overwhelmed, or unsure whether you can keep going, you're not alone. And you're exactly where this process often becomes most meaningful. As you listen, there's no pressure to fix anything today. This is simply an invitation to listen honestly, to notice what resonates, and to allow God to meet you right where you are. Let's continue the journey together.
So here we are, week 4. And if you've been walking this path with us since day 1, you know that feeling. The new year, new me energy is officially gone. It's long gone. This is usually that point in the timeline. Whether it's a gym membership or this recovery journey, this is when the parking lot starts to empty out a little. That initial adrenaline, that high you get from starting something new, it's worn off. The dopamine hit from buying the new notebook or signing up for the group, that's faded. And now we're just left with the actual gritty work. We're not just dipping our toes in anymore. I feel like we're waist deep in the waters of mental health recovery. And honestly, it feels heavy. And I think that heaviness catches people off guard. We have this cultural idea that recovery or healing or even spiritual growth should feel like this steady ascent, lighter and lighter every day, like a balloon rising. But the reality of week 4 is almost always the opposite. It feels heavier because now it feels real. We're not resetting the clock today. We are stepping further into the process, and that means the novelty is gone, and we're just left with a mess we're actually trying to clean up. It's the difference between looking at a blueprint for a house renovation and actually standing in the middle of the demolition with dust in your lungs. It's a bit suffocating, and that's why so many people, I think, tap out right about now. The reality sets in, but we're sticking with it. We're staying in the room. We spent the last 3 weeks sort of circling around Principle 1, laying all this groundwork. But let's just ground ourselves again, because frankly, I need the reminder just as much as anyone. In the chaos of a Tuesday or a Thursday, I forget the baseline. So Principle 1 is, realize I am not God. It sounds so simple, but let's say the whole thing. The full admission is, I admit that I am powerless to control my tendency to do the wrong thing and that my life is unmanageable. You know that phrase, I am not God? It sounds so incredibly obvious on the surface. It's almost insultingly simple. Like, do I really need a deep dive into mental health to tell me I'm not the Almighty? I mean, I check that box every time I can't find my car keys or when I trip over the dog. But when you're in the thick of anxiety or deep depression, or you're trying to manage a chaotic household while you're falling apart inside, that statement isn't just theological trivia. It's a crisis. It is a crisis. And that's exactly why we looked at Matthew 5, verse 3 so closely in the last few weeks. God blesses those who are poor in spirit and realize their need for Him. That poverty of spirit, it's not about your bank account. It's about a spiritual and emotional bankruptcy. It's getting to that place that Paul describes in Romans 7, verse 18, where he says, I want to do what is right, but I can't. That verse, it always hits home. It just completely destroys the idea that mental health struggles are just a lack of willpower. I mean, Paul had willpower. This was one of the most driven men in history. He had zeal, but he still hit a wall. where his want to was not enough to fix his can't. And I think for a lot of us, especially in the church, we think if we just prayed harder or maybe memorized more scripture, the anxiety would just vanish. But Paul is showing us a whole different reality. And for someone dealing with emotional numbness or, crippling fear, that isn't just a Bible verse. That's the daily reality check. It's admitting that the toolbox I've been using to fix my own mind, my logic, my control, my coping mechanisms, my carefully constructed schedules, all of it, it's empty. It's opening that drawer and finding nothing but broken tools, and that emptiness is terrifying. We are culturally wired to avoid that feeling at all costs. We fill the silence with podcasts, with scrolling, with noise, anything. But the promise, and this is the paradox of the whole thing, is that this admission of emptiness is actually the doorway. It's not the end, it's the beginning. So we've established the principle. We know the what, but we need to shift gears now. For this week and next week, we're moving into the how. The material for this week frames it as a mission with 4 specific actions to complete Principle 1. And we have to move from just intellectual agreement, nodding our heads at the idea in a sanctuary or in a living room, to practical action. So for the next 2 weeks, we're looking at 4 actions. But today specifically, we're focusing on just the first 2. And interestingly, these first 2 actions, they're not about what we need to start doing. They're about what we need to stop doing. That's often harder, isn't it? I mean, it's easier to add a new habit, like I'll meditate for 5 minutes or I'll read a devotional, than it is to break an old survival mechanism that's been keeping you safe for 20 years. So much harder. Stopping is active work, and the 2 big barriers we're confronting today they're massive. We're talking about denial and control, the twin pillars. These are the twin pillars that hold up our dysfunction. They're the structural supports of the false self. And if you knock these down, the whole facade crumbles, which is what needs to happen. It's exactly what needs to happen for God to rebuild. So let's look at the first action. Stop denying the pain. I think when we hear the word denial, we get this caricature in our heads. We think of the guy standing in a thunderstorm, soaking wet, shivering, saying it's a lovely sunny day. We think of it as this blatant, delusional lying. But in the context of mental health recovery, denial is much more subtle than that. It's rarely a flat-out lie to the face of reality. Denial is a false belief system. It's an internal script that just runs in the background of your operating system. It's the voice that says, I'm fine, or it's really not that bad, or the big one, I can handle this on my own if I just try harder. It's a way of minimizing reality just to make it feel manageable. It's taking a mountain and telling yourself it's just a speed bump. And here is where we have to apply some compassion, because this is crucial. Denial didn't start because we were evil or stupid. For many of us, denial started as a brilliant survival mechanism. We tend to judge our past selves for being in denial. We feel so much shame about it. But at one point, that denial served a vital purpose. Think about a child growing up in a chaotic home. Maybe there was addiction or rage or neglect. Or think about someone who went through a severe trauma. That child's brain needed a way to cope with an overwhelming reality. So it was a defense. You learned to say, I'm fine, because saying I'm hurting wasn't safe. Or maybe you realized really early on that expressing pain didn't change the environment. It just made you a target. So you learned to shut it down. Denial was a shield. It protected you when you were a child or when you were in the crisis. It kept you functional. So it's like a cast you put on a broken leg. It protects the injury so you can hobble around. But the problem is we're still wearing the cast 20 years later. And now that cast isn't protecting the leg. It's causing the muscle to atrophy. It's causing an itch you can't scratch. It's crushing us. It is distorting reality. And you can't heal what you don't acknowledge. There's a profound verse in Jeremiah 6 verse 14 where God addresses this head on. He says, they offer superficial treatments for my people's mortal wound. They give assurances of peace when there is no peace. Superficial treatments for a mortal wound. Wow, that image, it's visceral. It makes me think of battlefield medicine, where you just slap a Hello Kitty Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Taking a cough drop when you have lung cancer. It's addressing the symptom while completely ignoring the root cause. It's cosmetic, not curative. And that is exactly what denial does. It keeps us in the shallow end of the pool. We treat the anxiety with distraction, scrolling on our phones for hours until we pass out. We treat the depression with isolation, pulling the covers over our heads. We treat the pain with substances or food or extreme busyness. Workaholism is a huge form of denial in the church. Those are all superficial treatments. They manage the discomfort for a moment, but the wound underneath is still bleeding. Scripture calls us to bring the pain into the light, the unspoken truth. The material talks about this concept like the elephant in the room. It's the pain everyone feels. It's the tension at the dinner table. It's the sadness in your eyes that you think nobody notices. It's the family secret. But as long as it remains unnamed, it remains unhealed. And to keep that truth unspoken requires massive amounts of energy and specific coping strategies. We avoid, we suppress, we shut down emotionally. We become experts at changing the subject. But there's a cost, and this is where I want to spend the bulk of our time today. The curriculum breaks down 6 specific consequences of denial. And I want to go through these slowly because I think every single person listening is going to identify with at least one, if not all of them. These aren't just abstract psychological concepts. These are the symptoms of living behind that shield. These are the indicators that tell us the shield has become a prison. So the first consequence is denial disables our feelings. This is a biological and a spiritual reality. Our brains are not designed with a selective mute button. You cannot say, I'm going to numb my grief and my fear and my trauma, but then expect to keep your joy, your passion, and your ability to love deeply. It doesn't work that way. The mechanism that feels pain is the same mechanism that feels pleasure. If you numb the pain, you numb everything. So it's an all or nothing system. You can't just turn down the volume on the bad stuff. It's like the master volume on a stereo. You turn it down and everything goes quiet. If you build a wall to keep out the hurt, that same wall keeps out the love. There's a verse in 2 Peter 2:19 that says people are slaves to whatever has mastered them. If denial has mastered you, if the number one rule is don't feel bad, you become a slave to emotional numbness. That explains that flat feeling so many people describe. I've heard people say, I don't feel sad necessarily. I just don't feel, they're just checked out. It's almost like a zombie state. They're walking through life, doing the chores, going to work, but there's no color. It's all grayscale. It's a defense mechanism that's gone wrong. It's dissociation. And mental health recovery, true biblical recovery, requires learning to feel again. And that is terrifying for people. It means feeling the anger, the grief, the disappointment you've been stuffing down for years. It's like when your foot wakes up after being asleep, the pins and needles hurt before they feel normal again. But it also means you get to feel hope again and connection. We have to do this honestly and safely with God's help. But we have to feel. We can't act like robots and expect to have a real relationship with a living God. I mean, God gave us tears for a reason. Emotions are part of the divine image He placed in us. That leads right into the second consequence, which this one hit me really hard. Denial wastes our energy. Think about the sheer caloric burn of maintaining a facade. Pretending to be okay when you're falling apart inside is physically and mentally exhausting. It takes incredible mental energy RAM in your brain to keep your story straight, to keep the mask from slipping, to constantly monitor your environment. To make sure no one gets too close to the truth, you are constantly on guard duty. It's like running a high-intensity background app on your phone that just drains the battery by noon. You wake up tired because your brain has been working overtime just to keep all the defenses up. You snap at your kids or your spouse, not because they did something wrong, but because you're running on 1% battery. And the connection to anxiety here is huge. The text points to Matthew 6, verse 34. Don't worry about tomorrow. When we're in denial, we rarely live in the present. We're either consuming energy, trying to rewrite the past, pretending it didn't happen, or wasn't that bad, or we're dreading the future, worried that the truth is going to come out. We've become these frantic time travelers, just avoiding the only place where we actually exist. And anxiety thrives in that gap between the past we're trying to hide and the future we're so afraid of. Healing only happens in the now. God meets us in the present moment. He describes himself as I am, not I was or I will be. But denial keeps our minds everywhere else, constantly spinning scenarios to protect the lie. So, what happens when you stop? If you stop denying, you release all that energy. Imagine what you could do with that energy if you weren't using it to hold up a shield. You could use it to love. You could use it to create. You could actually use it to heal. So, we're numb and we're exhausted. The third consequence is denial negates growth. We simply cannot grow while we're hiding. It's impossible. Imagine a plant that's kept in a dark box. It stops developing. It might stay alive for a little while. It might even retain some green, but it will not flourish. It won't bear fruit. And secrets do the same thing. Secrets keep us spiritually and emotionally stunted. There's a psychological concept here, too, that we get stuck at the age of our trauma. It's often called arrested development. You might be 40 years old, chronologically, paying a mortgage, driving a car, running an apartment. But if you've been hiding a trauma since you were 10 years old, there's a part of your emotional processing that is still 10. And when that button gets pushed, when you feel abandoned or criticized, you react not like a 40-year-old, but like a scared 10-year-old. It's a heavy realization. And we see that in relationships all the time, people reacting with the emotional maturity of a child, because that's where the growth stopped. That's where the wall went up. In Psalm 107, verse 14 says, He led them from the darkness and deepest gloom. He snapped their chains. The chains only break when we come out of the dark. God is in the business of redemption. He never, ever wastes a hurt. But, and this is the catch, He cannot redeem what we refuse to bring into the light. If we keep it in the dark, we keep it from His redeeming power. You're essentially saying, God, you can have everything else, my Sundays, my tithe, my service. But this part, this hurt, I'm keeping this, and that part just rots, which brings us to the fourth consequence, and this one. This one feels the most tragic to me. Denial isolates us from God. It goes all the way back to the beginning, to the Garden of Eden. It's the primal human reaction to sin and pain. Genesis 3, verse 10, Adam says, I heard you walking in the garden, so I hid. I was afraid because I was naked. Shame's natural reflex is always to hide. We think if God sees the real us, the broken, messy, anxious, addicted us, He will reject us. So we hide in the bushes. We try to clean ourselves up before we come to Him. We put on our Sunday best emotionally. We pray these polite, sterile prayers. We treat God like a distant relative we need to impress rather than the physician we need to see. But the beautiful contrast to that is 1 John 1, verse 7. If we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with each other. And walking in the light doesn't mean walking in perfection. It means walking in visibility. It means walking without the cover-up. That is the antidote. God doesn't withdraw from broken people. He didn't turn away from Adam and Eve. He went looking for them. He called them forward. And He does the same for us. He isn't saying, clean yourself up and then come out. He's saying, come out into the light so I can clean you up. Denial builds a wall between us and the only one who can actually help us. You can't have intimacy with God while you're wearing a mask. He loves you, not the mask. He wants the real you, even if the real you is falling apart. And if it isolates us from God, it inevitably leads to the fifth consequence. Denial alienates us from others. You can be in a room full of people. You'd be married for 20 years. You can have 1,000 friends on social media and be completely, utterly alone. If you are living in denial, it's the loneliest feeling in the world, to be surrounded by people, but known by no one, because nobody knows the real you. They just know the representative you sent out to handle the world. If you're presenting a false self to the world, then even if people love you, they don't really love you. They love the mask, they love the projection, and you know it. And deep down you know that you think if they knew the real me, the one who struggles with this addiction or this rage or this fear, they'd leave. And that creates a terrible kind of loneliness, what some people call the imposter syndrome of relationships. You feel like a fraud in your own life. That's Ephesians 4:25. Stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth. We fear rejection, so we lie. We say, I'm fine. But the irony is that the lie guarantees the very isolation we are trying to avoid. Truth feels risky. Telling your spouse, your small group, or your sponsor, I am struggling, I am scared, I am not okay. That feels like jumping off a cliff, but that risk is the only path to real connection. Isolation is far more damaging to your mental health than honesty ever will be. We are wounded in relationship, but we are also healed in relationship. You can't heal in a vacuum. You need eyes on you that look with love, not with judgment. And finally, the sixth consequence, which really just sums it all up: denial lengthens the pain. This is the ultimate lie of denial. We think it protects us from pain. We think if I don't look at it, it won't hurt. But the opposite is true. Denial multiplies suffering. It allows the infection to spread. It's like debt. The longer you ignore the debt, the more interest it accrues. You ignore it for a year, it doubles. You ignore emotional pain, it metastasizes. The curriculum references Psalm 32, verse 3 here. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away. That sounds remarkably psychosomatic. The spiritual affects the physical. There's a famous book in trauma circles called The Body Keeps the Score, and that is a biblical truth. Unresolved trauma, unconfessed sin, suppressed grief. It has to go somewhere. It doesn't just vanish into the ether. Where does it go? It settles in the tissues. It comes out as ulcers, as migraines, as panic attacks, as chronic fatigue, as back pain. The body is the battlefield where the mind fights its wars. So by trying to avoid the emotional pain, we end up creating physical pain. We trade a moment of honesty for years of physical suffering. Confession, just admitting the reality of the struggle, opens the door to relief. It's like draining an abscess. It hurts to lance it. Yes, it's messy, it's gross, but the relief that follows is the beginning of healing. Denial lengthens the pain. Honesty initiates the cure. So that's the first hurdle. We have to stop denying the pain. That's action one. But denial is usually protecting something deeper. It's protecting the idea that we can fix it ourselves. Which brings us to action two. Stop playing God. This is the root. If denial is the symptom, control is the disease. We deny the problem because admitting the problem implies we can't handle it, and we are terrified of admitting we can't handle it. We have built our lives on the premise that we are competent managers of our own existence. Now, playing God is a strong phrase. Most of us wouldn't walk around saying, I think I'm the Almighty. We know we aren't creating universes. So what does playing God look like in a mental health context? No, we wouldn't say it theologically, but we live it practically. Playing God means believing that I must manage my emotions. I must control the outcomes. I must control the people around me. And I must manipulate circumstances to keep myself safe. It's the belief that if I don't hold it all together, everything falls apart. It's an immense burden of responsibility that we were never designed to carry. It's the weight of the world on human shoulders. It's trying to be the general manager of the universe. But just for our little corner of it, it's the mom who feels she has to control every single mood in the house. It's the employee who can't delegate because nobody does it right. And Jesus confronts this directly. Matthew 6, verse 24, he says, no one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God in the idol of control, and your mental health suffers profoundly when you try to do a job that belongs only to God. Think about the anxiety of trying to control the future. That is a job description only God can fill. He's the only one who knows the future. He's the only one who is outside of time. When we try to fill that role, we try to guarantee outcomes. We break. Our nervous systems aren't wired for omniscience or omnipotence. The curriculum mentions the flesh here. And again, in church circles, we hear that word flesh, and we tend to think of sexual immorality or greed, the big sins. But in this context, in the context of recovery, the flesh is simply the self-directed life apart from God. It's the operating system that says, I got this. It's relying on my own willpower, my own logic, my own strength to fix my broken mind. It's self-reliance, which sounds noble. It sounds noble in our culture. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Be the captain of your own destiny. But in spiritual recovery, it's fatal. It is the very thing that keeps us sick. It's fatal because the tool itself is broken. You can't use a broken mind to fix a broken mind. Jesus says in John 15, verse 5, apart from me, you can do nothing, nothing. He didn't say you can do a little bit, but I'll help with the heavy lifting. He says nothing. And it's not about a lack of effort. Most of us are trying incredibly hard. It's about a lack of power source. It's like trying to power an entire house with a single AA battery. It's not that the battery isn't trying, it's just not designed for that load. When we operate in the flesh, we're running on that battery power, and the battery is dying. When we connect to God, we're plugging into the grid. So this brings up the inevitable question then. If we stop playing God, if we admit we can't do it, does that mean we just do nothing? Do we just sit on the couch, eat chips, and wait for a miracle zap from heaven? Because that sounds like passivity. No, that is passivity, not surrender. And there's a massive difference. Surrender is active. This is where the division of labor comes in, and this is so helpful for anyone feeling overwhelmed. We have to distinguish between our job and God's job. Let's break that down. This seems like a vital mental model to have. What is our job? Our job is honesty. Our job is surrender. Our job is obedience to the next right step. That's it. That's our part. We bring the mess. We bring the willingness. We show up to the meeting. We make the phone call. We pray the prayer. We do the footwork. We take the meds if they're prescribed. We go to the counseling. That is our agency. And God's job is the results. His job is the healing. His job is the transformation and the restoration. His job is changing the human heart. We get into so much trouble when we try to do his job. We try to manufacture our own healing. We try to force transformation in ourselves or our spouses, and that just leads to frustration and burnout. The relief comes when we accept our limited role. We don't have to fix ourselves. We just have to surrender the pieces to the one who can. That is such a relief. I can feel my shoulders dropping, just hearing that I don't have to carry the weight of my own salvation or my own sanity. I just have to carry the willingness. You were never meant to carry the weight of the fix. You are the patient, not the surgeon. The patient's job is to show up and stay on the table. The surgeon's job is to do the operating. When the patient tries to grab the scalpel, things get very messy. So as we wrap up this leg of the journey, we're sort of standing at a crossroads. We're being asked to stop denying the reality of our pain, to put down the shield, and to stop trying to control the healing process, to put down the scalpel. And looking ahead to next week, we're going to pivot to the positive actions, what we need to start doing, starting to admit our powerlessness and our unmanageability. But for this week, we just sit with the stopping. We sit with this reality check, and that's uncomfortable work. It requires sitting in the discomfort without rushing to fix it. It's a process. We say this all the time, but recovery is not a switch you flip. It's a walk. It's a hike up a very steep mountain. And mental health recovery specifically, it begins with surrender, not self-mastery. I want to leave us with 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. This is Paul again. He is pleading with God to take away a thorn in his flesh, some kind of pain, struggle, or mental anguish. He asks 3 times. He begs, and God's answer isn't okay. I fixed it. What is it? God's answer is, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. Wow, that just flips the world's logic completely on its head. We think we need to be strong to be useful or to be healed. We think we need to present this resume of all our strengths, and God says the weakness is the prerequisite. Your weakness is not a barrier to God's power. It is the container for it. Denial and control keep us stuck because they keep us relying on our own strength, which is insufficient. Truth and surrender open the way to healing because they connect us to God's strength, which is infinite. So, the bottom line for week 4, God is not asking you to fix yourself. He is asking you to trust him. Take one honest step this week, just one. Name one pain you've been hiding. Surrender one worry you've been trying to control. We're in this together. We'll see you next week as we continue the journey.